Drivers, start your engines. I'm Angela Roach, and this is Behind the Wheel, powered by HireMaster. In this week's Get Hired segment, trucking companies appear to be hiring at a record pace, as for hire carriers have added over 62,000 jobs in the past 3 months. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the number of jobs added by trucking companies in the second quarter was nearly double its best performance in the past 10 years. During the same period in 2020, the best year prior, trucking added 37,800 employees. These numbers have some experts wondering if the recent gains may be former self employed drivers becoming employee drivers. According to Jason Miller, Associate Professor of Logistics at Michigan State University, quote, "We have seen massive payroll gains this year in trucking, especially in the last 3 months. And based on job openings data, I see these figures only going higher for the transportation and warehousing sector," end quote. Couple the new jobs in Q2 with the current jobs opening rate of 6.9% for transportation, warehousing, and utilities, which is a 37% increase from its peak in 2018. And there is strong evidence suggesting freight is moving off the spot market and into the contract freight market. This move by shippers to the contract market is making it easier for carriers, both truckload and LTL, to increase their hiring projections and attract new drivers. David Jackson, CEO of Knight-Swift Transportation Holdings, said last week at SMC3 Connections 2022 in San Diego, quote, "We're definitely seeing more drivers, more owner-operators. These are individuals who got their own authority and were living off the load boards, and they're ready to come back to a safe harbor," end quote. Being behind the wheel of a truck for 10 to 14 hours a day often leads to a sedentary lifestyle, which can be rough on the joints, especially the hips. According to a recent Mayo Clinic study, people spend 70% of their waking hours sitting, and tight hip joints are one of the leading side effects of prolonged sitting. This often leads to other health issues, such as chronic back pain and knee pain. To reverse this trend, do the following exercises at truck stops each time you pull off the road. 3 sets of 30-second hip flexor warrior 1 stretch, 3 sets of lunges the length of the truck, 3 sets of 10 air squats, 3 sets of 30-second touch toes. And remember, a body in motion stays in motion, so get moving. In the news this week, as the coronavirus pandemic brought excessive demand and a bottleneck in the supply chain, we are now beginning to see a return to a familiar marketplace. Truckstop.com spokesman Brent Hutto told Transport Topics, quote, "Freight volumes are still above normal, still significantly above normal, but it's declined every week, so that's one thing. Rates have not necessarily followed suit because the fuel costs keep going up," end quote. The marketplace is returning to pre-pandemic levels rather quickly, considering the pandemic caused an influx of spot market freight as a significant amount of contracted freight was being rejected at the rate at which it was contracted. In the current market, expert analysts have noticed that load postings are down about a third of what they were last year, as some predicted earlier this year of a looming freight recession. Current freight volumes and associated trends are not indicating a recession, but more of a reset. Also in the news this week, future transportation funding might be more difficult to negotiate and secure based on the current administration's climate proposal. The Federal Highway Administration recently announced a proposed 90-page rule that aids the Biden administration's target in lowering the levels of greenhouse gas pollution. The goal of the legislation is to reach a 50 to 52% reduction from 2005 levels of greenhouse gas pollution by 2030. Which is on course set by President Obama to reach net zero emissions by no later than 2050. A similar rule was proposed in 2016 under the Obama administration. However, it was later repealed by the Trump administration in 2018. The Trump administration's reasoning for the repeal was based on advocating for improving infrastructure conditions and safety and reducing the highway congestion instead of environmental performance. In addition to the Federal Highway Administration commenting on the proposed rule, the American Road and Transportation Builders Association, which is known for advocating for infrastructure investment policies on behalf of transportation construction companies, expressed concerns stating that, quote, by drifting into environmental policy, the FHWA is acting outside of its core transportation mission, end quote. Although the overall goal is to reduce carbon emission levels, how it is achieved affects the transportation industry. If the proposed rule is adopted, lawmakers are concerned that new regulations will make the process of negotiating future transportation funding more complicated. In this week's Weather Watch, we have scattered showers throughout the United States along the Rockies as well as in the South, with more than 2 inches of rain expected in the Deep South. Temperatures are rising in the Pacific Northwest and Northern Plains to the mid 70s and 80s. We continue to see heat advisory warnings in much of Texas, Northern California, and Southern Oregon. Expect even higher temperatures and heat indexes reaching over 105 degrees in central Texas, as well as southern Arizona and parts of California, as all of these areas are currently under excessive heat warnings. Those residing in any of these areas are advised to stay hydrated, avoid too much sun exposure, and reschedule any outdoor activities to avoid heat stroke. Much of Nevada will be experiencing a mix of heat, smoke, and thunderstorms throughout the rest of the week. Be sure to check your local weather reports to ensure your own safety as well as the safety of others. And that's going to do it for Behind the Wheel. I'm Angela Roach. Be sure to follow or subscribe to catch each episode and leave us a like and a comment. We'll see you next time on Behind the Wheel, powered by HireMaster.